Okay, I made a lot of notes here. Hope I don't get lost. This part of a job, upholstery is kind of straightforward. Mechanical is kind of straightforward, but painting, there's 100 ways to do it, and there's 100 ways not to do it. So it's really fickle. I started when I was 16 and painted my dad's pickup. He started on the back fender. It's going to paint his old 51 International. He was going along there, and he looked over, and I was standing there watching. He goes, "You want to try this?" And I go, "Sure." So he said, "We stay so far apart, away from it. You come down to the end, you get off the gun, you come back, and that way you don't blotch it. Fire engine red." Well, I painted the truck, and he was very proud of it. Now, run one, it looked pretty darn good for the first time. Well, it snowballed from there. And when I was 22, I worked for a taxi cab business there in Liberty, Missouri, and I painted 33 taxi cabs in a month.
Wow.
That was an ordeal, but I did it. And at times I was painting 3 a day. And the cars were fairly, real straight, no rust. So it was just clean them as clean as you could get, buff them, rough them up a little bit, tape them and paint them, and out they went, out the door they went. But paint now is nothing like it used to be. It's totally different. There is a difference, a good difference, I'll put it that way. The paints today, they're more forgiving. If you get a big run or have a problem, with the paint, especially single colors, I don't like to get into too much metallics or anything like that, because that opens up another can of worms. You screw that up, you might as well take the whole panel, strip it, and redo it. But the problem with that is you have to do it same day. You don't want to change your gun pressures or anything like that, or it won't match the rest of the car. That's a real problem with using metallics, pearls, anything like that. It's real fickle. And that stuff is, get into a little detail here, pearls and flakes and things like that, metallics, when you're painting, a lot of people put their cars completely together. I'll show you some pictures of what I do. You can't do that. My cars, I gotta blow them completely apart, patch, repair, everything before you even get started. The pearls and stuff like that, you have to shoot the car all at one time, all in one day, because just the humidity from day to day, just 3 or 4 pounds of different pressure on your paint gun, and it won't be the same. You can paint half the car one day, come out, not even touch anything, reset your paint, mix your paint, shoot the rest of the car, and it'll be 2 entirely different colors. And you have to hang everything. You take the fenders off, they have to be standing up. You take the hood off, it has to be laying down. Because if you paint it standing up and put it on the car after it's painted, it won't match the fenders.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the way the paint hits the metal and the way you're looking at it. It's really strange, but that's the way it is. See, it's really, and this is things I've learned over years of doing it wrong. A lot of redos, And another thing, you can get on the internet and watch these guys on YouTube, but they don't tell you everything. They're just showing you, well, this is how I spray clear. And that guy will come across the car with the clear gun, and it's going everywhere, and he's putting it on like it's coming out of a bucket. I mean, on a garden hose, just really putting it on wet. You can't do that. I mean, they've got $30,000 paint booths, down draft booths. They've got temperature controlled, humidity controlled. A guy like me, I got plastic hanging up in my shop with concrete floor and lights everywhere with dust falling on it. And you just can't do that. But let me get started here with pass some pictures around. These are the last, or some, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 projects I've done that I had pictures before and afters. And pass that around, kind of give you an idea of how bad some of this stuff is that I start with. I don't have a lot of money, so I pretty much start with junk and build something you can drive. That's pretty much what I do. I got into, right out of high school, welding a lot. My dad taught me how to weld when I was 10, 11 years old. And that evolved into building race cars. I built chassis and stuff before I was even old enough to drive. Guys were bringing stuff down to my dad's, and I was doing his garage, using his equipment, of course, for free. And I was reaping all the benefits. That's how I bought my first car and building stuff. And then I got into paint, and I never really learned body work till, you know, probably 15 or 20 years ago, about 15 years ago. I got into patching some things, using some different putties and playing with it, learning what to do and what not to do. And there's a lot of not-to-dos. I will tell you that right now. People, and this, you can ask 10 painters, how do you do this with this type of paint? They'll all give you 10 different answers. There's really there is a kind of a guidelines to go by. You got cleanliness is the best. You cannot get stuff clean enough or keep it clean enough. You don't want to touch it before you put paint on or putty on or anything like that. Your prep work that's your job. Almost anybody can shoot the paint on, because even if you get a run, you can fix it. It's not that big of a deal. But the prep work and getting it slick and straight, your block sanding, all that, that's where your paint job really comes in. And I stick with a single stage. All it is just a polyurethane. The last 3 projects I've done, I used polyurethane, acrylic enamel, and regular urethane. And they all shoot different, they all mix different, they all act different. So I've been kind of up and down what the heck to use. I've been trying to find something I had a middle ground with. The best I've been using so far is polyurethane. I used it on that little, once you see these pictures come around, used it on the red truck, the little red pickup. And went to my paint store. They're really good about giving information. Some of these paint stores won't even, no, you just, whatever you want to use. Well, there's 5 products here, which one do I go for? They don't tell you anything. But my paint store is pretty good. I use wholesale paint up on North Oak. And he told me that paint, polyurethane, they use that on over-the-road trucks. Ken paints their trucks with it because it's real durable, no rock chips. With that little red truck, a 32 Chevy, was open wheel, no fenders, no nothing on it. I was worried about rocks throwing, front wheels throwing rocks up on the front end of it, chipping it all up before I could get it sold. He says, this stuff is hard as a rock. I painted it with that and put 3 coats of clear on top of that. I dropped wrenches on it and all kinds of stuff. And when I sold it, it looked like the day I painted it. And I probably drove it close to 2,000 miles, open wheel car, and it didn't have a rock chip, no place on it. So the stuff is very durable. Okay. Okay, the metal prep part. I work on this older vehicles, 30s, 40s, 50s is the newest stuff I like working with. There's no challenge from there on up as far as I'm concerned. You can buy a fender, replace it, and go on. I like to make parts, rebuild stuff. It's just my nature. And I think it was just the way I was raised. If you can't fix it, then you go buy something new. If I can fix it, I'll work on it until I get it done, But I work on this old stuff, so I sandblast everything I work with. Take it all apart, clean as much of the stuff off as you can with a wire brush. And people say, well, doesn't it work the metal? You don't have problems with it. I use 70 pounds of air pressure only out of my pot. I've got a 90-pound pressurized pot and 70 pounds of air, and I use this, what they call 30-aught sands from Call River Sand Company. It's 30 thousandths, what it really is, what they call it. It's the finest stuff they sell, and they mainly sell a lot of this to fiberglass guys that sandblast fiberglass because it's not real aggressive. If you got heavy rust, this really won't hardly touch it. It'll knock the top off, and you'll have to take a grinder, then you can finish, blasting with this stuff. But it takes paint off just like a paintbrush. You start going, you just work yourself back and forth. It creates no heat. It doesn't distort the metal. I've actually sandblasted aluminum with that, and it won't warp it. It's that light. And I played with a lot of different stuff, walnut shells, all the other stuff, and it's so expensive. I can buy a ton, which is 2,000 pounds of that for $80.
Oh, wow.
2 40-pound bags at I think it's Tractor Supply is $40 a bag. It's $1 a pound. I can buy a ton of that for the same price. So you do the figuring, I just put plastic in my bed of my pickup, go down there and I'll load it, put it in barrels and buckets and stuff to keep it dry, and that's what I use. So, okay, let's see. I sandblast it, and when it's done sandblasted, you take an air hose it off real good. This is a time where if you have any dents, any holes, anything like that, that's when you want to weld or repair. You pound out everything is just as nice as you possibly can. In fact, I'll even take dents, you know, just a small ripple, and I'll hammer them out. And it's just the knack. You get to doing it long enough, you'll learn how to do it. But hammer them out, and I'll take a file and file across that where I've hammered it, and it'll smooth it out pretty nice. I have found that using my way of looking at it, bare hand touching the paint or your metal doesn't tell you how it feels. I've got to put, I brought my knife. This is a rag I use to wipe things down with. This is 2 of them actually. And if you put a single layer of this between your hand and the surface, you'll feel way more, you'll feel a lot more stuff.
What is that?
I was going to write it down. It's a high quality towel that you get from like Kleenex companies. You can buy them at like a mop store or a cleanup store, toilet paper stores, paper places. And it's a real super, if you buy these by the little packages, if you buy the little 8x8s, these things are like $30 a package. They're almost, they're expensive as all get out. They're like 50 cents a piece. I buy it in a roll. You get in a roll so big around, I think there's 600 or something on a roll for like $60. So you can watch it. The more you buy, the cheaper it is. This is pretty much what everybody uses. A tack rag, I don't like them. They're sticky. And if you wipe too much, well, you get that stickiness on what you're working on. And like I say, you don't want anything on your piece that you're getting ready to work on. You do any puttying, you have to wipe it off. I use metal prep. Eastwood makes a stuff. I'm thinking about switching to them. It's not as toxic. The stuff I use, you have to use rubber gloves because it soaks into your pores, your skin, and your body. You get liver cancer, all kinds of stuff. It's really dangerous stuff if you don't use it right. But I use rubber gloves. You wipe it down with that, let that air dry, and usually your air hose will dry it real quick, and then I wipe everything down with alcohol, just rubbing alcohol. It dries real fast, gets rid of all the film, anything that's on there, and you're ready to go into your next process. It's prime, put more putty on, whatever it is. But you don't want to do anything till it's clean, because the stuff won't stick to it. You're asking for trouble if you don't clean it. And that's, like I say, put the putty on, primer on, paint on, anything, you have to clean. You will wipe a vehicle, I counted down, sanding, you'll sand the whole car at least 9 to 12 times. Every inch of it, you will sand it 9 times minimum. I mean, that's just the way it is. And wiping it, it's more than that, because you're working on different pieces. Very seldom you ever, find a whole door or a whole fender that you can just wipe off, spray it, and wipe it after you're done. You'll have something you're going to have to go back and if you pick it up to move it, you've got to wipe all that area down. But you handle it. I try to use cotton gloves, little brown ones, little thin ones. I try to use them to keep my oily skin off of them as much as possible. You don't want to wear colognes while you're doing any body work, even priming. The floral smell that in the air will get on your product and the paint won't on adhere. Yeah, you've got to be this stuff is, like I said, it is very fickle. You want to mess somebody's paint job up, find out the day before they're going to paint, go in and you don't even have to get in the building. You can stand outside a window or a door and take, I'll get in a minute, silicone spray and spray it in a crack into that room, and his paint job will be messed up. That stuff stays airborne for hours. And it opens the door, and it blows in there, and it lays on the car. You put the paint on it. 3 days later, you got all these little bumps and holes, and it's messed up.
How do you know that?
It happens. Yeah. I won't even anymore, when I'm doing body work and stuff like that, I won't even use a rattle can spray can in my shop because I'm afraid of the propellant in the can. If I want to shoot something, I take it outside, around the corner, as far away from any doors or windows I can to keep that from happening. And once you start putting primers and stuff on your car, on your pieces, parts, you stick with the primer that goes with your system. If you're shooting illegal animals, you use that mixed primer that you got with your kit. You buy it all together at one time. Don't use a rattle can to, I just got this little place here, is all I got. I got a 3-inch plate. I don't want to mix up half a cup of primer just to shoot that little place. You better, because if you don't, you'll mess it up. It will not, either it will not be compatible with it, or the propellant in the can, you won't get it cleaned off. It's really strange. But yeah, it's hard to do, people. It really is. Let's see here. Okay, let's see, we got down the air, we got the melt prep. I'm had to make notes. This is really involved. Let's see. Patch the holes, got that, prime the pots. Okay, yeah. Okay, now, once you got everything all knocked out, you got your metal straight as you can. If you got anything that's what I use, if it's, you may have a place you can't get to really patch or weld it all up for some reason or another. It's just in a weird place. I'll run into a few times. I use, or the metal is so thin. This is part of the reason another reason I use it. The metal is so thin, like that little 32 Chevy, the bottoms of those doors on that truck, 3 or 4 inches up from the bottom, were just, you could go like this and just thump holes in them. The metal was gone. And I resheeted them on the bottom, but then I went back where I put that piece in there. I use what they call short strand, it's Duraglass is the name of it, short strand fiberglass. It mixes up just like body putty, but it's got little bitty pieces of fiberglass in it. And if you put that on bare metal, you can't get it off unless you grind it or take a hammer and a chisel and scrape it off that way. It will not come off. I've tried burning it with a torch just to see. I was just wondering how good is this stuff. And that's how I've learned all this stuff is, practice, trial and error. And I really love that stuff. The green truck that's on there, the top one at 55, I did that 18 years ago. And just so happened, I saw them, the people I did that for, my wife's uncle, we saw them yesterday. We were in Columbia, went to a wedding. And I asked him, how's the old truck doing? He says, it looks just like the day you brought it. And they loan it out to people to weddings and all kinds of stuff, and he drives it, still drives it. And that had holes where I couldn't, at that time, I don't think I had a MIG welder. And I put chicken wire, rabbit wire behind the holes, and I used that short strand fiberglass and pushed it in there and got it all filled in. And he says, this stuff hasn't cracked, hasn't came apart, nothing. And that's almost been 20 years. So it's fantastic stuff. But you do try as much as you can. If you can weld, you cut the piece out, make you a panel, tack it all in there, grind it all down. And then I use what they call featherlight body putty. It's real, when you mix it up, it's real super, well, it's featherlight. It's real super light, it's flexible. So if you put it on a fender and it vibrates, it won't come off and pop off. I use that. And then for little pinholes or something that's very minute, sometimes you get, you mix up your putty, you put it on, you'll sand it down, you may have a little air hole bubble in it here and there. And this is another thing, learning how to spread your putty. If you go too fast, when you're spreading it out, you'll get air bubbles in it. You'll get pockets of air in it. When you sand it, knock the top off, you'll end up with little divots in it. Well, they've got some stuff they call icing, and it's like toothpaste. And you put a hardener with it, mix it up, and you just fill the little holes up. I let everything I do, all my primers, all my sealers, everything, putties, they say you can put it on and go back and sand in an hour. I let it set overnight because I ran into problems with high humidity, doing stuff in the summertime. We go back out, do it, I go in the house, eat, come back 3 or 4 hours, all that stuff's all dry. Take 80 grit sandpaper, start going out, and it starts rolling up and coming off. Well, then you got to redo it. I said, well, that's too much work. I'll just leave it till the next day. I got a whole body here I've got to do. I got plenty, plenty to do. So you just set it aside. I get me what you want to call it, assembly line going. I start with certain parts and just work around them and come back to this one and just keep going in a circle. Sometimes I get a little mixed up and I have to tag things so I remember what I had done, where I was at, because some things may not be dry the next day or two, and you have to skip it. You got to go to something else. So I got these little tags with wires on them, and I put on there what I did last and where I was going with it, because it may be a week before you get back to it. Well, what did I do? I don't remember where was I at on this, But that's part of that. Here's sandpaper. Oh, safety. This is another thing. I use these little masks for primer pretty much only. When I'm shooting the paint, I have that here too. I have a mask. I use these because it's urethane based primers, and it's not like the old enamels and lacquers that your body would kind of absorb. This stuff doesn't absorb nothing. It gets in your lungs, it's there. It will kill you. It's bad stuff. You see all these guys on YouTube, you go to any body shop, man, they got the full face gear. A lot of them wear suits, and that's not only just to keep the dust and the dirt out of their paint, that's to protect them. You get the stuff on your body, it's bad stuff. I mean, they took the chemicals out. I can't understand this. Supposedly they took the bad chemicals out to make it, environmentally friendly, but yet this stuff will still kill you. So what did it do 50 years ago? I mean, that was must be some pretty scary stuff, But I got some sandpaper pieces here we're going to pass around, and this is another, give you an idea. This is done on everything you do. If you do a little putty place, you have to sand it with 3 different grits of sandpaper. You start with the rough, the 80, then you go down to the 220, then your 400 to get it smooth, and you do everything like that. Because if you got a fairly heavy putty, you start with 220, you're going to be there all day. It's a process. And in between each grade of paper that you do, you wipe, blow. I got a vacuum sweeper. It's got one of the big Brussels wheels on it, or mouths on it, and I try to suck all my dust up so it doesn't get, because I do all my body work in my paint booth. It's all in the same place. So I got to try to keep it all cleaned up as much as possible. So I suck it all up. You wipe it all down because you laid your hand here holding the part while you're sanding. Your handprint is right there. If you don't clean that off before you go to your next process, it's going to be there. You may miss it, So I clean and wipe every time I change paper. Every time you do anything, you wipe it off, at least with alcohol. And it's quite a deal here. Okay. Now we're getting down to the primers themselves. I learned this the hard way. You only put etching primer on bare metal only. You do not put it on anything else. You can put it on top of itself, but you don't want to put it on other primers, bodywork, anything, because it'll take and pull it loose all the way to the bare metal. It's a chemical bond, what they use to make it work, and it will eat all the way through whatever you put it on top of, and it'll go all the way to the bare metal. And it just loosens it all up and it'll wipe right off. I messed up the tailgate on that yellow pickup. It had some places on there, once I wet sanded it, it went down to bare metal, just 5 or 6 little places, And I thought, oh man, bare metal, I better put some etching primer on that so it'll stick. Nah, it was a no-no. I should have just mixed up a little urethane primer, which is the 2K stuff I use. It's got a hardener in it, and it's actually a surface primer. You can put it on, they won't tell you, but you can put it on bare metal. I did it on this truck, on that Yellow International. I should have just mixed some of that up, shot those little bare spots, and went on with my paint job. And I didn't. I put etching primer on it, let it set all night, come out the next day, boy, that looks good. I took a rag and started to wipe it, had a little dust on it from sitting overnight, and I was going to get ready to paint, and I went to wiping it, and it all come off of my rag. It went all the way to the primer. Every place I put that, it just ate it completely up. But that'll never happen again. It's just trial by error. You learn, you know, like I said, nobody tells you. And like I said, I have guys, friends of mine that are painters, and they'll say, I'm being stuck on something, something's not working quite right. And I'll call them up and I'll say, well, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, how can I do that? Well, you can do that. Well, I would just sand it and reshoot it. Well, I did that one time. That was a mistake. Anytime you have fresh paint, like you just painted a car, fender, whatever, doesn't matter what it is, and you have a boo-boo, and you sand it, you wait till the next day, or at least 2 days, until the paint's dry, and you wet sand it out. Do not try to touch it up that day. Whatever you do not try to put paint on it that day. Wait another 2 days for that paint, because you opened that paint up. You took the hard shell off the top. That paint's still not dry all the way to the bottom. I made a mistake. Next day I went out there and wet sanded it, wiped it all off with my little squeegee. And oh, that looks good. Mixed up my paint, shot it on there, and I put a little dust on it. And then I hit it with some, you know, got it nice and wet and shiny. The thinner, the reducer that I mixed up in my gun to put that paint on there, took it all loose and it all crinkled. It ate it. It was too hot for it. The paint was too green that I was putting it on. Nobody tells you this stuff. Well, I found out the hard way. And all you gotta do is let it set for a couple days, you go back out there, you're sanding it all off, smoothing it up, and repainting. It's a lot of work. The red Ford that I just passed around, that 46 Ford sedan, I had to paint the top of that twice. This new paint, you don't get in a hurry. In fact, you don't do a 50% overlap, which means you shoot a line of paint and you drop down only 50% coverage. You know, you come back. Now I'm learning you want to do maybe 10%, just enough to know that you went over that edge. That's too much paint. This new paint, if you put too much on, and now you got to wait 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes between coats. It's got to be pretty much dry to the touch before you put more paint on. If you don't, you put paint on and you think you're okay. I did the top of that Ford, and I waited 20, 25 minutes like it said on the can, because it was a little bit humid that day. Shot it just down to the drip rail is what I was doing on the top of that car. So this thing's 12 feet long, you know, it's a gigantic car, and I did my 50% overlap. So I went to the house, got something to eat, let it dry, tack up real good, and I was going to come back out and look at it. Came back about an hour and a half later, and I got up on my walk board, and I'm looking along there, and it looked like the moon. All kinds of little holes in the top of this car in the paint. And what it was, the paint underneath wasn't dry. The paint I put on top of it was cutting the air off to it, and the only way it will dry, it's a chemical situation. It will pull all the way to the bare metal, and it goes poof, and it pops that paint out, and it makes little craters all over your car. So it's nice. So I had to take 600 grit sandpaper. Took 4, 5, 6 hours, sand the whole top. I had to wait 2 days, sand the whole top of that car, waited another 2 or 3 days, and then repainted it. And I took my time, sat back, and nowadays you used to be able to set your gun at full amount of material. Now you about half. You don't put it on super heavy, you don't put it on wet like we used to. If you do, you're going to have all kinds of problems. The polyurethane that I painted that little red truck with, it was pretty, that's the way I painted it, but I only put 2 coats on because it covered so well. And it was, I don't know if it was heavier or what it was, but I only put 2 coats of paint on it. I'm stopping. That looks real good. It laid real nice and slick. That truck, I didn't even wet sand it or anything. It laid so nice that I just cleared it, and even the clear laid real nice. I didn't wheel it or nothing. People, well, but that took a long time to wheel that out. All I done was waxed it. And they was amazed, but that happens 1 in 50 cars that you paint will do that. Normally you're going to get orange peel, which it looks like an orange, you know, you get the little bumps all over. I can go out here in the parking lot, you got brand new cars, they have orange peel in them. But it's, usually you get that kind of stuff and it's a lot of sanding to get it out. And
do you charge by the hour?
I try not to do work for other people, like a paint job. I usually do my own projects, so I can, because if you screw up, it comes out of your pocket. If I quote somebody, yeah, I'll do it for $1,500, well, if you got to do the top of the car 3 or 4 times, you didn't make no money. You're already in a hole, you know. So I do it for myself, try to do, these ones I haven't done for myself, those are people I've known. The Dodge, I've known that guy for 30 years. I actually did the subframe, put the motor transmission, all the steering and stuff in it. That was back when I was doing mechanical stuff. So I did probably 30 subframes and steerings and stuff. But I knew him for a long time, and he didn't have any money. And had the old car for 16, 18 years, and he finally saved up enough money. Thought, well, I'm gonna put some paint on this thing. And I charged him $1,500. It took me a week, and we put acrylic enamel on it, and it turned out really. I'm really impressed with it. It's a pretty little car, you know, for what it is. 4-door, big ugly Dodge, but it turned out really nice. And I did some body work. I had to fix the threshold. It's a 4-door, one of the, I think it was the back doors. The whole step where you open the door and inside, that was completely gone. So I had to rebuild that for him and put Cadillac tail lights in it. But he was super. He takes it to a couple of shows. You probably may see it around here in Kansas City. But it just, I just like to do stuff for myself, because if I screw it up, it's out of my pocket. You know, my time's pretty cheap, you know, the way I look at it. I don't make a lot of money on these things. Give you an idea, the highest price one I've sold was that little red truck. And that was, almost 2 years ago now. I had $11,000 in that. Ooh, this is on tape. I better watch this. I had $11,000 invested in parts only, and I sold it for $25,000. You know, but it took me a year to build it. So you take that $14,000 for a year's wages, that ain't no money. But I love what I do. I have a lot of fun. My wife knows where I'm at every day. You know, I don't smoke or drink, go out with the boys or anything. She lays out to the shop. And here in the house, you know, she knows where I'm at. And I stay out of trouble doing that. And I love to help people troubleshoot things, because that's just the way I am. People bring stuff to me because I guess I'm kind of a jack of all trades as far as welding and, like I say, stuff like that. I fixed transmissions that were cracked and all kinds of things that are broke that people can't find, you know, and they bring them to me and say, well, I still talk to so-and-so and he can't do it, or he wants $1,000. I look at it and I grind it off and weld it up, so they give me $20 and they're gone, you know. That's just the way I am. Here's a mixing cup and a filter. Every time you get ready to mix up your paint, you have to filter it. No matter what you do, you put it in a gun, unfiltered, it's going to plug up. You get splatters, and it just makes more work. It's really hard. This shows you the mixing ratios, 2, 3, 4 to 1. And what that means is, like, the first number is your material, your paint. Second number is your hardener or activator, and the third number, if there is one, and they'll tell you when they give you your paint, they'll usually mark it on the lid. The third one is your reducer. And some paints take no reducer. The clears I use take no reducer whatsoever. You just put a little hardener in it, and it's ready to shoot. It's like water. It's real thin. I use Matrix Company brand. It's the clearest and one of the hardest on the market. That's why I use it. It's durable. And you put a light dusting on just to have something for the next coat to stick to. I set the gun just a little over half. The clear you can put on real heavy, fairly heavy. I set it just a little more than half material. I'll show you that. This is a primer gun. Just a cheap, what the heck's the name of that company? Harbor Freight, $20. I usually prime about 2 cars with these and throw them away and buy new ones, because they get built up in them and stuff, and the primers. You really don't want to use a primer gun. Put primer in your good paint gun. These things, the nozzles aren't that great. They can put primer on fine, but that's it. You don't want to try to paint. I wouldn't paint a bicycle with one of these things. They're pretty crude, but they're real good for priming because they don't plug up. They got a big nozzle. The 2K, like I said, stuff that I use, it's a high build. It's got a hardener goes in it, and that's why it can be used as a surfacer on bare metal. And I usually put 3 coats on. Regular primer to get the same amount of standard single primer, to get the same amount of it as a 2K, you'd have to put at least 4, maybe 5 coats to match a 1 coat of the 2K stuff. It's that thick, that heavy. I'll usually put 3 coats on, and that's when you do your blocking. and you'll see all your divots, or you won't see any, because that stuff will fill in a lot of your little imperfections that you don't have to mess with trying to put skim putty on and all this. A lot of guys, they say it's a sprayable filler. You know, they'll call it that, and that's pretty much what it is. It's almost a body filler in a can. It's so thick, and you use very little thinner with it. It's almost like house paint. How thick that is when you stir it up in a can. That's pretty darn close how thick it is. And it'll be rough. You'll get orange peel, but you're going to knock all that off. You're going to sand it down. Like I said, you start with the I don't usually on primer use 80, but I start with like a 220 or a 150 and work my way all the way up to 600. Use at least 3 to 4 grades of paper. And some guys will go all the way to 1,000 where the primer is just shiny. And the main reason they do that is so in a shop area, they don't want to take their parts out in the sun to look at them. They can almost tell by the light in their shop if they've got a wrinkle or a bad place in it that way. The shinier the part is, the more that's going to show up. I take all my pieces, I think I'm ready, I'll get it all down to except the last coat of primer that is a sealer coat, and I'll get it all ready for that. And I take mine out in the sun. I usually try to find direct sunlight or in a shade tree, because the paint will look different in the shade with partial sun than it does right out in broad sunlight. It's a strange thing. You probably notice it with your car. Sometimes you'll go to a car show and you park in a shaded area or a darker area. Well, I never noticed that blemish there before. Well, you won't see it in the sunlight, but you'll see it in the shade. And it's the same way when you're prepping your car for paint and all that. It's the same thing. Artificial light, like in here, it's worthless. I'll think you can feel it. Boy, it'll feel like a piece of glass. Boy, I got this really good. You'll take it outside, put it in some. Oh, I got a lot more work to do. You know, you're not even halfway there, and it's just trial and error. It's a lot of work, a lot of block sanding. I'll pass this around. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Another big difference between the old paints and new paints. Back in the day when I first started, air pressures, 20 pounds. If you got to 22 pounds of air pressure, coming out of your gun, that was enough. Now we're up to 30, 35, 40 pounds of air pressure. And it's just the mix, the difference in molecules and the stuff that's in the paint is different. And these new guns, they're designed for that. That one there will go up to 100 pounds actually. Will stand 100 pounds of pressure. I'll stand around. There's some sanding blocks, lots of new ones and a couple old ones. Just to give you an idea, what I've got probably 100. I've got a box full of pieces of wood, plastic, paint sticks glued together. You find something someplace those won't go into. You got to make something, and you do not want to use your bare hand. I see so many guys on YouTube and some of them, and they're doing this stuff, in a rounded area or something. That's the worst thing you can do. You always use a block under the paper, no matter what. I don't care, because this one guy said, well, I use the heel of my hand. Okay, what's going to happen? He's going to have a deep place here, a deep place here, and a high place right in the middle as he's sanding, And when he puts his final paint on there, all you're going to see is ripples all up and down that car. I see it all the time. I see paint jobs where maybe they didn't strip the car. They sanded the little rock chips, sandy, rust places on the side of the car, filled them in with some primer and then painted it. And it looks like the moon. Just all ripples down the side of the car. They didn't prime it and block sand it. That's, your prep is 90% of your paint job to getting it smooth. Because once you get it painted, I do all my priming, sanding on the primer dry. There are some guys that will they say the urethane won't absorb it, but I'm skeptical of that, so I do all my priming, sanding dry, and I use a guide coat, and what that is, I got the gray primer or black primer, whatever you have on there. And this is usually about the second Yeah, usually the second coat of primer, after you've blocked it once, you've already done your patchwork and you've already blocked it once, I'll prime it again and use a different color of paint. Usually it's like a Krylon or anything like that, just a cheap, inexpensive can of paint. It's totally different color than what you have on there, and just dust it onto that part. And you let that set and dry for a couple of hours, maybe overnight, you know, depends on the weather, but let it get good and dry. And when you take your board and you go across that and you come back, anything that's low will be dark. It'll have that paint still on there. Your high spots, what you're sanding, you'll sand that away, and your low spots will all show up as those, whatever color it was you put on there, that will still be on there. And you keep sanding until they're gone. And that way you know you got it as flat as you can possibly get it. And you may have to do this 3, 4, 5 times per panel. I mean, it's a lot of elbow grease. I mean, I was so tired, that Yellow International, I did body work on that for 9 months. Nothing but body work. The chassis took me maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And I was done with that. Motor overhaul, painted, the chassis work was all painted, done. It was all body. That thing was, I'll bring pictures later on, show you how rough some of these were. I wouldn't pick that project today. I started that 20 years ago. And I got it enough, I bought 3 trucks, and I got enough pieces to, what I thought was real good at the time, to build one. And I got it all set together, and everything fit. And in '93, we moved up on the hill from downtown Missouri City up on the hill, and then the flood hit. Well, I had my mom and dad's furniture and all their stuff in my garage in my new shop for almost 2 years. Well, the truck got stuck back in the back of the barn and kind of forgot about, you know, buried under a bunch of other stuff. And I was in between projects. I did that little red truck, and I told the wife, I said, I think I'm going to get that International out and finish that. And oh, Lordy, was it bad. I didn't remember it being that rough. And there's a lot of beating, a lot of repairing, a lot of patching, but you learn every time. That's part of the other thing I love about this. Every time you pick up a piece, you learn something new, how to shrink something, how to, you know, pound it out, how to make it smooth and nice, and it gets easier. You know, I have said, well, I put a lot of time in that, but it wasn't that bad. And when you look at something that's mutilated and you're saying wasn't that bad, you're getting too used to this. I mean, it's, you know, it's getting where you've done a lot of it. But I love the challenge. I don't like working on something. All I gotta do is strip the paint off of it and repaint it. That's as redundant for me. I don't care for that. Here's my good. Oh, this is a good spray gun. I call it a good one. It was that one was a $20 gun. This is $150. And the difference between this and the other one is like a VW versus a Cadillac. This thing, the way it handles with paint in it, and the spray it puts out in the pattern, how fine and nice and smooth it comes out, is remarkable compared to the other one. It's just money. You know, some guns cost $600, $700, $800. They get way up there. But my wife bought me this one, I think about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, for Christmas. She went to my paint store and asked me, what would you buy him? Because I was using a siphon gun at the time. It has a tank on the bottom. It pulls the paint up through the bottom and stuff. I was using one of those. You get that thing full of paint and you're reaching out over the top of a car. I could hardly keep the jug off the car. You know, it's just, you know, it's really heavy. And I never tried one of those, and she bought me that one. And I thought, what have I been doing all this time? I should have bought one of these a long time ago. And there's another safety deal. We're getting into the paint part.
5 minutes.
Okay, this is it. I won't put the filters on, but this is my full mask I use. It's got filters that goes on the ends, on the sides. They're full of red paint, that's where I left off. But they have a tear-off shield, so you can keep the plastic. I said, well, how do you keep the paint? How do you clean that plastic with if you get paint all over it? Well, they got these tear-offs that stick on there. And you buy a box of 20, 40, and you put that on there, and that protects it. And when it gets dirty, you just peel it off. It's still got one on it. But that mask is almost $200, but you get no fumes at all in it. It's fantastic. It's just like standing here breathing air that I'm breathing right now. You smell nothing when you put that on. You can shoot a car, and I can walk to the doorway in my booth, get ready to leave, and open that up, and it's just kind of overwhelming at times. He'll just hit you in the face, like, whoa! And it's a good thing you have that on. You will really, really be glad you did it. Okay, after you get it painted, then you got to sand it 3 more times. And you sand different than you do on the primer. The primer, you go different directions. So you make sure you're getting it flat. You'll go to the left, middle, go to the right, and crossways. You kind of change your directions up. When you're sanding paint, it's all one direction, as much as possible. You can go a little bit one direction, but you really don't want to try not to. You try to stay straight with it. I usually start with, it depends on how the paint lays, but you can usually start with 1200 or 1000, go to 1200 and 1500 paper. And all you're doing when you're doing that is trying to get the paint slick enough so when you start to buff and cut it, it's not so much work. It's easier. It's actually quicker and easier to sand it than it is to try to buff it out. I've had fenders and stuff that I work with. I'll get that later. That's not that bad. And you stand there for 4 or 5 hours of buffer trying to cut it. It just takes a lot longer. I've been way quicker just to sand it and done it over. You get through sanding a place, you use this little squeegee, and that's how you tell. It's all done wet, and that's how you tell whether you're done or not. You take this little squeegee, you squeegee all the water off, and you can see you got trash in it. There'll be little light places, little bright places, and you want the paint all dull. This is matte dull as possible, and that's what this is.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
You know, since you won't allow us to bring our cars to you, because I would definitely do it after your presentation, but can you tell us who you might recommend?
Oh, Lordy. There's a bunch of them, but they're expensive as all get out.
Well, can you find a cheaper one?
Not really. They're kind of like me, and the people I know are getting up in age where they just don't like doing it very much anymore. Yeah, it's
$10 paint job on that Rolls Royce to you?
No.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank
Let's
you.
give him a round of applause.